Hey guys, welcome back. It's rainy, it's cold. I don't know what's happening in Germany with the weather, but we're back on the project and we're looking at Lo-Fi House, and today we're going to talk about the bass. So last time we had this. Pretty cool piano chops. Now let's look at the bass line. For the bass line, it's pretty easy to get lost in the process, to overcomplicate things, but I like to keep things simple. So let's just try the Wavetable synth. Pretty awesome synth in Ableton. It's kind of like their response to Serum. And what we want to do is like having a classic house synth, and for the most classic one, we're just going to look at a saw wave. So let's just create a new clip here. So last time we were working in E minor, and the exported result that we chopped up is pitched down by 5 semitones. So if we look at the piano roll, when we start at an E, we go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we need to set this to B minor. And now we're good to go. So if you're using chops like this, and we're talking first about the notes and then about how we do the bass. If we're using chops like this, it's pretty hard sometimes to get to know the root note. And really, the EQ8 is your best friend in this term. You just grab a new EQ8. This is our processing here. Just if you use the minus and plus symbol on your keyboard, you can easily just fold it together. But if you're using a fresh EQ8, you can just double click on this spectrum here and it folds. It gets opened here, and what it shows you is not only a bigger frequency response, but it also shows you, if you look at this little corner here, the notes of the corresponding frequencies. So let's look at, we have F sharp, B, F sharp, B, and B is our lowest note. So we start with the B. Let's go to B2, and because that is a long chord, we just need the B here. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is just look at the root notes of each segment and see what kind of note is used in the chord, and then just draw in the corresponding MIDI note. That's a G. So we go down to a G. What is this little boy here? That was just the reverse, right? Yeah, so this is a G as well. We can just drag this on. What is this? We have some little note here, which is also a B. So we go back to B. And we can just drag and drop this all the way along. So this whole section is also B. So we can just copy this, but I imagine that we kind of switch up the bass line a little bit just to get a cool on the better feeling for it and not just repeat it over the time. So we just copied the section, so we can just copy the same bass. Let's look at this. That's a G. So we have some refreshing things here. And now we have the B with. You can also increase the gain so you can see better. And we go back to G in the last part. So now we can listen to it together. Kind of weird what is going on here, so let's just put it on mono. Felt like this should be. this should be a G. Let's put it down an octave. Perfect. So now that we have the notes, I think we can talk about getting it lower, of course. I mean, it is a bass after all. You can even add the sub bass here. Lower the notes. So we have this like really basic sawtooth. So let's look at the sound. First, I think it would be really cool to just use little like those kind of notes. So we maybe not. If we turn down the amp here. And let's look at this pattern. We can even go to the G here. Yeah. Now, I want to use this pattern, but it would be better for listening to it. We just lower the frequency here, put a more steep filter on it. Now it sounds more like a bass. So we got things rolling a little bit. And now we can use this little trick here at the end and just fill up the notes. So these are eighth notes. Okay. In order to give it a little bit more crunch, we can use the OSR or any other filter type here. So if you click open the info box, you can see what kind of distortion and what kind of circuit lies behind each filter. So clean, you have no drive option, and with the OSR you have a hard clipping option, and you can just, fatten up the sound a little bit. Kind of gives it like morphs it into a square wave because it adds odd distortion. But we don't need all the way to up, but just a little bit. And now maybe just add a thing about wavetable synthesis. It's super easy at the beginning to get kind of confused with where all the parameters are, but if you just click on them, they will create a new line and you can just easily adjust for example, the filter frequency and modulate it by, let's say, the amp. And I don't know how much I'm going to talk about synthesis in this course to you, because I feel like this song is more sample based. But if you know oscillators, if you know envelopes, if you know filters, and if you know LFOs, those are the only 4 things you need to know to get started with wavetable synthesis and subtractive synthesis. Where FM, frequency modulated synthesis, is a little bit different. It's kind of more random and more, you need to explore more, and you have different kind of approach to synthesis. But if you're using wavetable, if you're using analog, if you're using Serum, for example, it's all the same. So you start by selecting a sound source. Just a quick overview here. We have a sawtooth here, that's the sine, that's a triangle saw, and that's a square wave. Then you have the amp and the amp envelope, and attack essentially says how long does the sound need to get to the highest volume. Like if I increase, let's just talk about a little bit about synthesis just to get things right. So let's put everything up here. And let's say we have attack of 0 milliseconds. Then we have immediate loud volume. Let's just turn it up. Right? If we increase the attack, let's say to 500 milliseconds, it will need 500 milliseconds to go up to the highest volume. You can even hear it better if we turn it up by 2 seconds. We need 2 seconds to get to the highest point. The decay time is like the second point. So if we have the attack at 300 milliseconds, or let's say 600, then we have the decay, and this is the time between those two dots. It's essentially useless if you have to sustain, and sustain means the loudness of the note after the decay time. Like if this is at 0 dB, essentially sound goes from here up here, and then after the decay time to here, which is essentially non-audible because it's the same loudness. But if we decrease it to here, to like the middle, and decrease the decay, you will hear that. Like you hear the swell to the maximum loudness, and then it goes to a medium loudness to minus 17 dB. And if we just decrease it to 0, you get this little pluggy sounds. Like if we decrease the attack, and if we decrease the decay, it's like it goes immediately up and then just right in 200 milliseconds back to 0. And release just determines how long the sound kinda is still sounding after you release the note. So this has to do with MIDI. So if we have a long release, of course, the MIDI note can't be longer than the decay, because then it will not be triggered. But we have like this, we have still a long release. So this is basic envelope. But you know, just play around. Let's really look at what your favorite presets use as an amp, because you know, if we are talking about pads have long attack and usually long releases. So if we're talking about plugs, they have short attacks, short decays, and short releases. They usually are kind of like, and so on. So back to our bass, just a little X-course here. We have the bass. We have a little really short attack, no sustain, short release. So we're talking about the pluggy synth. You sometimes need to go with the attack to 1 millisecond because it gets clickies otherwise, and you don't want clicks. And we want to modulate the frequency of the filter. So what we're doing, just drag this up here. Just, you know, just a little bit. And what you can see here, the frequency follows this curve. You can see this here. It starts at a higher point, and this is the point we determined, so like 25. If 100, it would start at like 20k, because we're at 300. But it just, you know, it depends on which frequency you set up here. But it kind of starts at the higher point and just lowers back to 390. And what we also want to do is kind of modulate with an LFO. And an LFO is kind of like a modulating source. So whatever you assign to the LFO will follow this curve here. Like this is a sine wave, and you can determine with the rate how fast it is, how slow it is, how the shape looks, if you want to offset it, so it starts at 0 phase and then goes up and down, or if you kind of want different shapes, or if you want to decrease the amount. Anyway, what you can do with this in parallel to the amp modulation is to kind of create the feeling of someone who's opening and closing the filter slowly by just assigning a slow LFO. I would recommend. You can see this is really wild, and it gets wilder if you increase it. Everything below 1 Hertz is slow. reduce the amount. So occasionally we have some sort of opening and closing. Now let's listen to everything together from now on. Okay, so I like it, but we can still use some more distortion on it. So let's look at this. Overdrive kinda gives you like, I always feel like it's more of an amp kinda distortion. Maybe a saturator afterwards. So we have really distorted sounds. Let's take Ma auto filter here because of the previously named reasons. And just kind of makes it so it's right underneath. Shorten the So my thought was, you know, you'd use overdrive and saturator to really beef the sound up, and now you might ask, okay, why the hell does he filter the bass again? So essentially what it does, distortion, it kind of lowers the transients and gets everything more fat and more closer to each other and adds more overtones. And I want this fat sound, but I also want to kind of have it filtered. And this would be too many high frequencies, so I just filtered it again. But still, we still have those two tone-giving distortion units. Now it's just like a really regular bass. And that's it for the bass. In the next video we're going to talk about the drums, so make sure to watch that as well.